Welcome to this explainer. Florida's 2026 midterm elections are shaping up to be absolutely wild. Some of the most transformative in recent history, actually. We're looking at shifting demographics, a massive reshuffling of state leadership, and a totally wide open governor's race. The Sunshine State has always been the center of attention in American politics, right? But this upcoming cycle, it's basically going to rewrite the entire rule book. Let's dive right in. Let's start by looking at a genuinely staggering figure, 13.1%. That was Donald Trump's margin of victory in Florida during the 2024 presidential election. Because to really get what's coming in 2026, we have to look at the immediate past. This double-digit win didn't just claim the state's 30 electoral votes. It completely flipped Miami-Dade County, which is traditionally a Democratic stronghold. That was a huge, monumental moment that really solidified Florida's recent trend away from being that classic nail-biter battleground state. But hold on a second. Despite all that overwhelming momentum, a recent Change Research poll of likely voters shows a surprisingly tight 45 to 41% gap. So what does this actually tell us? Well, it means that while Florida has heavily trended conservative over the last few cycles, it hasn't totally abandoned its battleground roots just yet. Both parties still have literally everything to play for, and the 2026 midterms could definitely still bring some very competitive surprises. Here's the roadmap for today's explainer. We're going to quickly cover the shifting Sunshine State, the Senate special election, reshaping the U.S. House, the open governor's race, and finally, the great cabinet shuffle. Starting off with Section 1, the shifting Sunshine State. This rightward shift we've been talking about really hit the gas pedal back in 2020, when Donald Trump expanded his victory margin, making some really significant gains among Cuban voters. Then came 2022. Republicans swept every single statewide office for the first time since Reconstruction, and Governor Ron DeSantis pulled off the largest landslide victory Florida had seen since 1982. Insane, right? And all of that basically set the stage for the 2024 results we just discussed, cementing a totally new baseline for the electorate as we look toward 2026. Let's move right into Section 2. The Senate special election. This one was triggered by a classic political domino effect. So following the 2024 election, Senator Marco Rubio resigned his seat in January 2025 because he was appointed as the U.S. Secretary of State. Obviously, that left a massive sudden vacancy in Washington. In response, Governor DeSantis tapped Florida's Attorney General Ashley Moody to fill the seat, and just like that, she was officially sworn in as a U.S. Senator. Now, because Moody was appointed, she actually has to run in a 2026 special election to finish out the rest of Rubio's term. And it's not going to be a walk in the park. Moody faces a primary challenge on the right from Jake Lang. Meanwhile, on the other side, there is this massive, crowded field of high-profile Democrats. We're talking Alan Grayson, Jerry Demings, Jared Moskowitz, Angie Nixon, and Alexander Vindman. They are all rushing in, sensing a pretty rare opportunity to grab a federal seat. That brings us to Section 3. Reshaping the U.S. House. Taking a look at the current congressional delegation, we've got a commanding 20-8 split in favor of Republicans following the 2024 elections. That is a massive chunk of power in the National House of Representatives. Because of that, these 28 seats are absolutely critical for both national parties as they fight for control of Congress. What happens in Florida is directly going to impact the balance of power in Washington. But hey, here's the massive wildcard to keep your eye on: potential redistricting. The Florida legislature is actually considering redrawing the state's congressional map for 2026, which is expected to favor Republicans. If they do redraw that map, it could widen that 20-8 gap even further. That would completely upend national strategies for both parties and fundamentally alter the congressional math before a single vote is even cast. On to Section 4, the open governor's race. Since Governor DeSantis is term limited, the Republican primary is basically a total free-for-all. You've got names like Charles Burkett, Byron Donalds, Paul Renner, James Fishback, and Jay Collins is considering it too. We're looking at everyone from federal reps to local leaders and wealthy investors jumping in. It is going to be a fiercely competitive and honestly an undeniably expensive primary season. On the flip side, Democrats are scrambling to field a heavy hitter to reclaim the governor's mansion. You've got names like David Jolly and folks like Jerry Demings, Al Lawson, and Angie Nixon all considering a run. But the real curveball here? Jason Pizzo entering as an independent, backed by the centrist group No Labels. That adds such a highly unpredictable dynamic to the general election. He could easily pull voters in some very unexpected directions. And finally, Section 5, the Great Cabinet Shuffle. Remember that domino effect we talked about earlier? Well, when Ashley Moody moved over to the Senate, James Youthmere, who was the governor's chief of staff, took over as Attorney General.
And now he's seeking a full term in 2026. He's facing some pretty determined challenges to hold on to that position, both from the right, with Republican Stephen Leskovich, and from the left, with Democrat Jose Javier Rodriguez.
It's basically the exact same story for the chief financial officer. Jimmy Patronis resigned to run for Congress in FL1, so the newly appointed CFO, former state senator Blaise Ng'Alia, is now actively defending the seat against multiple primary challengers. Because of these rapid domino effects, almost every major statewide office has fresh leadership fighting just to stay in place. It's a lot of moving parts. Rounding out the state cabinet, we have the Commissioner of Agriculture. The incumbent Republican, Wilton Simpson, is completely eligible to run for a second term. But here's the thing. As of right now, he hasn't announced his 2026 plans yet, so that leaves us with one more potential question mark hanging over the statewide ballot. Now, anchoring this entire midterm cycle are the sweeping state legislative elections. The top of the ticket races always grab the headlines, sure, but these legislative races give you, the voters, a direct say on the very foundation of Florida's government. All 120 seats in the State House of Representatives are up for grabs, along with half of the state Senate, 20 out of the 40 seats. This is literally where the granular day-to-day policy direction of the state gets decided. So as we gear up for November 2026, we're left with a huge question. Will this election completely cement Florida's new dominant conservative identity? Or are we in for a surprising political shift thanks to tighter polling numbers and those unpredictable independent wildcards? With completely open executive races and a fundamentally reshuffled state cabinet, the only real certainty in Florida politics right now is change. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep your eyes on the Sunshine State. It truly never fails to keep us guessing.